Fitech, do you use an iPhone or an Android? Let me know below. This video talks about 3 things. Firstly, how to shoot time lapses on an iPhone. Secondly, why the iPhone mysteriously deletes frames after you stop shooting. And thirdly, tools I recommend to create better, higher quality time lapses on your iPhone. So I recently got myself a refurbished iPhone 13 Pro and I'm absolutely loving it. Now, how to shoot time lapses on an iPhone. The first thing you should know is that in iOS there is very little control over the time lapses that you shoot. It is pretty much a plug and play approach. There are not really any controls and it spits out a full HD video file at 30 frames per second no matter your other video settings in a HEVC codec, which means that your file sizes will stay really small. To shoot a time-lapse on your iPhone, you open up the camera app and then you swipe to the left to the time-lapse mode. You want to frame up your shot, make sure it's level and make sure that nothing is creeping on the sides of your frame. Depending on which iPhone model you have, you can change your lenses from 0.5 to 1 to 3x, which is really nice to have a nice time-lapse mode on all 3 lenses. And I do recommend going into your camera settings and enabling the grid, the 2/3 grid, which can really help you with leveling your shot. The only controls you get are focus and exposure, and you get this by long pressing the screen and then swiping up or down to increase or decrease your exposure, and that's also where your focus will lock. Once you're happy with your framing, hit the record button and let it run. Now, a small little side tip here, and I wish I didn't have to say it, but you're out and about, your phone is in full view shooting a time-lapse. Please be aware of phone snatchers. I see it happen in London all the time, so keep that in mind while shooting. Once you've shot at least 5 minutes of footage, you hit the record button again and your time-lapse is done shooting. Now, something weird happens behind the scenes, depending on how long you've been shooting. With a normal time-lapse, you select your interval and your shooting length, or your number of photos, and this results in a clip length, in a time-lapse video length. iPhones do something entirely different. They use so-called dynamic intervals. If you're recording a time-lapse under 10 minutes in recording length, it shoots a frame every half second or 2 frames per second while recording. This results in a 15x speed increase when you compare normal video to the time-lapse video. This means 15 seconds of recording time-lapse results in 1 second of time-lapse footage. How do we get there? 15 seconds of capturing 2 frames per second means you've captured 30 frames and the video is playing back at 30 frames per second. You end up with 1 second of footage. So 15 seconds recording, 1 second playback, 15x speed. If you go over 10 minutes of recording time, the iPhone switches to 1 frame per second, and when you're done shooting, it goes back and it removes every second frame or half the frames before the 10 minutes. Allegedly, this is to keep the shot length about the same. Now, if you go over 20 minutes of recording time, the iPhone takes a frame every 2 seconds. If you go over 40 minutes of recording time, it takes a frame every 4 seconds. If you go over 80 minutes of recording time, it takes a frame every 8 seconds. This results in a 15, 30, 60, 120 or 240x speed increase when you compare the real-time video that you would record or the end resulting time-lapse video. And because of this removal of frames, you end up with about the same clip length for every time-lapse that you shoot. Now, this is handy for most people, but for people like you and me who want more control and full control over their time-lapse shots, this is not ideal. So I recommend using another app to shoot your time-lapses. If you would like me to make a video about which apps or which app I recommend, let me know down below and make sure to be subscribed. The time-lapse video has been recorded. Now, what can you do with the built-in editor in your photo gallery? You can adjust the look, pretty much adding a filter on top. You can adjust the crop or the aspect ratio, and you can adjust the skewing, which is really handy if you're shooting extremely wide angle, facing up where all the buildings are like this. You can kind of pull them back. Keep in mind that doing this, adding any like cropping and stuff like that, does remove pixels, lowers your resolution of the end resulting video, and because it's 1080p, 1920 by 1080 pixels, that's already not a lot, so you don't have a lot to lose. Now we got the shooting and the editing out of the way, I want to talk about some of the tools that I use and recommend so that you can shoot better time lapses on your iPhone. The first thing I recommend is a decent phone clamp. Not one of those janky ones that you can't add any pressure. You want one that you can really tighten because you're shooting with an expensive phone. You don't want it to drop or you don't want it to jiggle, so get yourself a nice phone clamp that you can mount to a tripod or a tabletop tripod or another clamp. That's my second item that I recommend, a sturdy setup. The worst thing is when you've got a beautiful time lapse, but it's super jittery, and then you have to go in post and stabilize it, which I've made many videos about before, but you just want to get things right in camera. The third thing I recommend is when you're traveling in a car or by plane is getting one of these little suction cups that you can add the mount to so that you can shoot through glass. A lot of touristy viewpoints don't allow any tripods whatsoever, so this is a great solution. If you can't mount a clamp anywhere, this little suction cup really helps. Then, if you're going to be shooting through glass, you often get ugly reflections, which are super distracting in your time-lapse shot. So I recommend working with a modified dog bowl, if you remember that video, or something like a lens skirt, which is slightly more expensive, but maybe a bit easier to use. One more thing on the topic of reflections, you will notice I have a black phone and a black phone case because this does not reflect as much light, which will show up in the lenses. So a black phone case helps. I've got the pop socket case, which has this removable pop socket thing that you just slide on the back, and this is a nice little extra safety feature for when you're out and about. Might help with phone snatchers. All the tools that I just mentioned are linked down below as affiliate links. You support me and this channel by clicking those buttons and buying things, and I appreciate you doing that. You can become a member of this channel for $1 a month. It goes up in price if you want to support me more, but it starts at $1 a month, and then you get access to members exclusive videos like the recent vlog New Phone Day, where I explain why I left Samsung after 8 years and I'm now back on the iPhone train. If you got any questions, drop them down below. If you want to learn how to time-lapse, I've got a free ebook about time-lapse, and I've got a fantastic course called the Ultimate Time-Lapse Course that you can check out down below. I've also got time-lapse for beginners, which is a bit more entry-level at a more entry-level price point. That's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. May the clouds forever be in your favor. Bye bye.